Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Training and Tangents podcast with myself, Ben, and my stunning co host, Tom.
Hello there.
How are you?
I'm doing good, thank you, mate.
Good. So, in today's podcast, we're going to be talking all about New Year's resolutions, but also goal setting because a lot of people this time of year will be trying to set new goals, understandably. But we want to make sure that your goal setting is the best it can possibly be. So, this is a fantastic episode if you're looking to do that. Now, at the start of the podcast, we always like to ask each other a little bit about how our week's been going. So, it's either training or a tangent, which is where the name comes in handy. So, Tom, give me a training or a tangent that's happened to you in the last week since we've spoken.
Okay, so this is it's kind of both. I am actually running a workshop at the end of January, so it's the Sunday the 25th in Bristol, which I'm quite excited about. I've done quite a few workshops in the past,
I've been
which
to
have
one.
been Ben's
Very
been
good.
to one. Ben's been to the bodyweight one I ran in Dublin. But this one I'm going to do as a combination of there's going to be some sort of bodyweight mastery stuff, so some handstand stuff, some ring stuff, rebuilding your athleticism, so looking at how we introduce jump training and plyometrics, and then also an element that's going to be focused on sort of foundational lifting and just getting the best out of your technique, so you can lift some heavy weights and get really strong and build a lot of muscle mass. So yeah, that's the most exciting thing from this week that I've kind of got that date booked in, and looking forward to delivering that. Because whilst I work predominantly online, I do still coach in the gym, and I really enjoy delivering workshops and in person sessions. So yeah, how about you, mate? What's new with you?
Firstly, that sounds amazing. I went to your one in Dublin, and I would highly recommend anyone to go down. Even if it's just to mix up your training and to find a new potential avenue to train. And, this is kind of what this podcast is all about. It's just about finding new ways of making sure that whatever you're doing is sustainable and enjoyable. And I would highly recommend going to it because I had a lot of fun. Even despite my shoulder. So I went in with a shoulder issue, and we were still able to work around that very, very nicely. So if you have got any injuries or anything and you're worrying, oh, I might not be able to do this, go along anyway. You'll probably pick something up. So for me, what did I do this week? I actually took a bit of a step back from training. I trained quite well once I got back from Florida. I got into the routine of getting like 4 sessions in, but I could kind of feel like I was getting a bit sick, so I kind of took my foot off the accelerator a little bit, but still allowed myself to get in and get sessions done. And I also knew I was going to be looking after my nephews this past weekend, so I knew I had to reserve some energy for that, and thank God I did, because those two they don't stop like at all. And Uncle Ben has a reputation to live up to, so yeah, I had to keep up with those two. But no, I had a great time this weekend. Less physical, but I introduced them to Warhammer. I started talking to my eldest nephew Zach, who's 9. He really wants me to train him, and he keeps asking me
Very good.
when can I train. And the boys were on the treadmill at the same time. There's a treadmill in the living room, and they were both jumping on that constantly throughout the day. So it's nice. You know what? It's kind of cool. Like, and I say this all the time to parents with kids with CF. But the earlier you get a kid, used to and exposed to exercise, the easier it is for exercise to become a part of their life. And it's so cool that my nephews are both so physically active because, yeah, I mean they're seeing their dad. Their dad was actually away in France doing a high rocks.
Oh
That's
wow,
why.
that's cool.
Yeah, so like they're around health and fitness, and it's so cool. But yeah, that was my week. Not much to report. My shoulder's feeling a lot better, so I can feel like I can train a little bit more. But yeah, nothing major, but it was cool to spend some time with the boys. Okay, so we are obviously talking about New Year's resolutions. So Tom, what do you think about New Year's resolutions? Are you the type of person that sets them? Do you like them? What do you think of them?
Um, so yeah, we've always spoken a little bit about this already, but I used to hate the idea of New Year's resolutions. Firstly, because I think people go about setting goals in the wrong way. But secondly, I was like, oh, if this stuff is important to you, why are you not doing it already? But actually, over the past couple of years, I've taken a little bit of a step back on that kind of viewpoint, because I think Christmas is generally a really nice time to actually take a little bit of a step back and reflect on where you're at, and also look at areas that you potentially want to like potentially change and improve. And obviously, like most people do indulge over the sort of the Christmas period, so it's quite natural for people to want to feel like they want to be a bit healthier, feel a bit better, potentially lose a little bit of weight coming off out the back of Christmas.
Yep.
So yeah, I very much kind of changed my approach on that. And for me personally, sort of looking forwards over this year, there's nothing major, but I think one thing that I've been reflecting on a little bit recently is that I really miss I obviously like I train consistently. There's like I don't have a problem with that, but I do miss like the social elements of training sometimes, and like the community element, and also just being pushed and a little bit of competitiveness. So I've been trying to think of different ways that I can get an element of that back in, and I'd quite like to start doing a bit of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. It's one of those things. I've got a bit of an all or nothing mindset on it, just because like everyone that I know who does it, they train like 3, 4, 5 times a week, and I'm like, I cannot commit to that amount of training. So I've kind of held back on doing it, and also finding a session that works, obviously around work and family life.
Yeah.
But yeah, my goal is just to commit to doing that like once a week, or potentially just look at like going to the gymnastics centre or a climbing centre or something along those lines at least once a month, just to mix things up, add a little bit of a different kind of dynamic to training, and just because I think it'd be good fun, to be honest.
I mean, that sounds awesome. I thoroughly believe in having something different to just lifting weights in your life at some point. That's why I've always tried to play like a sport or something like that until I became 35 and my knees were like, no,
Yeah.
You think you can jump and run and cut? No, son. You need to spend about 6 months getting ready to run for 10 seconds, which is, admittedly quite difficult. I think you're similar to me in the sense that I think when you hear people going, "Oh, I've got this New Year's resolution," first of all, you think, why not just start now? It's this whole like, "Oh, I'll start on Monday," but like to an even grander scheme in our heads. And obviously, us being coaches, you hear that sentence all the time. I'll just start Monday. I'll just start Monday. And I think you start to develop a little bit of a bad taste in your mouth when you hear that stuff, because you're just like, if this is important to you, why are you waiting? Just do it. Just start now. But also, yeah, I came to realize that, you know what? If you want to start the next part of your progress in New Year's, cool. That's absolutely sweet. I'm here to support people to do that, rather than like you get a lot of coaches who are people. Let's not give them the title they deserve. Let's give them the title they deserve. People. You get a lot of people who are just like, "Oh, you should just do it now." Like this is. Oh, you're going to be like a sheep, and I'm waiting until New Year to start this.
I think
Yeah.
I really hate it when people have that kind of moral superiority of like, oh, look at me, I'm in the gym in December, there's no one here, but come January it's going to be packed, and like what
Cool.
like yes, I
You're right.
just don't like. If someone's in the gym trying to improve themselves and get better, like we should be doing everything we can to support that person and help them on that journey, rather than turn our nose up at it because they weren't there in December. Like it's stuff like that really kind of like grates on me.
Yep, I agree. And I think you start out a little bit like that. I mean, I did. I know I did, and then I was like, actually, that's a bit of a dickhead way of looking at it. I want to encourage everyone I possibly can. It doesn't matter when you start. You can start on a Monday, you can start New Year. I don't care. But you touched upon it there. Goal setting as a whole. Now, if you're listening to this at New Year's, if you listen to this in July, if you listen to this in September, it doesn't matter. All the principles we're going to talk about here, we got 5 in particular. But the 5th one is arguably, Tom and I both agree on this, the most important one. So make sure you stick around to the end, because it is, I think if you get the 5th one right, the other 4 will just kind of fold into place anyway. But we're going to start at the top. So the first thing is you have got to plan for your worst version of you, not your best version of you. So what do you make of that, Tom? Like what do you make of that statement in general?
Yeah, I completely agree, Matt. And I think this is probably the place that most people go wrong when they're looking at making changes after New Year and setting New Year's resolutions, and arguably why it's like the gyms are really busy through January and February, and then there's a big drop off, because people start off with this unrealistic expectation of what they're able to do, and either they aren't able to stick to it, feel like they failed and drop off, or they do stick to it, burn out massively because it's so far removed from what they were doing, and then they maybe pick up an injury, or they can't continue because they're so burnt out from like pushing things so hard. So I think going in with this approach of like, yeah, maybe you've got like your more ambitious schedule or what you're planning for, but actually planning for like say your worst week, or like your worst version of you kind of showing up, like what's actually realistic on those weeks, and making sure that you're really focusing on hitting those things on a weekly basis, rather than necessarily trying to hit the stretch goals, if you like, to depend on what's going on. I completely agree, mate. How about you? How do you sort of work that with clients?
I mean, it's something my clients have probably heard ad nauseum at this point, because if you can game plan for the worst day of your like week, or the worst week, and you can still get things done that make you look back at that day or that week and be like, cool, I actually feel like I may not have pushed the needle as far forward as I would like, but I did something. There's something there that made me feel like it was a successful week. And I always say it's this compounding effect, like so say for example, I always say we've got this natural bullshit meter in our head, and it's very, very easy to test as well. So I always say to people, okay, so if I ask you to, let's say for example, you are currently walking 1,500 steps a day, Tom, okay?
Yeah.
It's not a huge amount. And then I say to you, okay, so 10,000 steps a day, yes or no? Immediately, if you're asking that person, yes or no, and I say to them, answer as quickly as possible, you've already decided in your head, no, that's way too much. That's too much of a jump from where I am to where I'm asking to be. You just basically ask yourself that question, okay, well, 10,000, that's too much. Immediately, yes. What if I say 5,000? And you start going, okay, cool, so we're in the right area. Then you go, okay, what about 3,000? They're like, yeah, I think I could do that. You basically have these low barriers to entry that you can clear every single time, because that's more important than having a great day of like having 10,000 steps, and then cool, you did 10,000 steps, but then the next day, because that took so much out of your day, you maybe had to push things on to the next day that you had to do that day, and then you've got this like catch-up game, and then suddenly the next day you're like, oh, I'm going to go back to 1,500 because 10,000 was ridiculous, and the things I put off yesterday to get that 10,000 have now compounded to today. Yeah. So it's better to have this consistent average that you can achieve. Like, you always want to set yourself up to be successful. I always think it's like an arena. You want to go into the fight knowing, hey, I can 100%. I'm going to make this. This is going to be a win for me every single time.
Yeah. And
again, a lot of people think, oh, that's not hard enough. Yeah. It's like, oh, it needs to be harder. I'm like, it'll get harder if you just stick. It's not like it just gets easier as it goes. It gets more and more challenging, but don't look for the most challenging path to start. Look for the most realistic, the most accessible path to start. And then as you develop and get better and stronger and your habits become more automatic and habits, then you can start, adding more in. But we'll talk about that a little bit more. Yeah.
Go ahead. Sorry to cut in there, mate.
Yeah, you're good.
I was just going to add to that. I think you mentioned kind of averages. I think actually looking at like weekly averages rather than day to day and zooming out a little bit is like really, really important, and actually creating a little bit more flexibility in your approach rather than being very, very rigid is one of the best ways to actually get consistency. And like say sort of like your weekly averages from a step count perspective, like you might have some days where it is genuinely harder to get the amount of steps in that you want to, and yeah, there's maybe things that you could have done when you reflect on it, but actually like let's stop beating ourselves up for having 1 or 2 days that aren't quite as good, because we know, like just the way everyone's weeks are set up, but like both from an activity perspective, a time perspective, a like nutrition perspective, everyone's going to be have different days in terms of it. It might be easier to be in a bit of a calorie deficit on some days versus others because of like everything that you've got going on, stress, like social stuff, etc. So if you zoom out and actually look at your week as and look at the averages you've done for that week, like have you hit a couple of training sessions? Have you on average done X amount of steps per day, like averaged over the course of the week, roughly whereabouts, like, are you from a nutrition perspective, and appreciating like some days will be a little bit lower, some days will be a little bit higher, but actually if the averages are in and around where we want and need them to be, then you're going to be making progress regardless of that. And actually, I think having that approach helps people to stop getting stuck in the day to day of like, oh, I haven't done this stuff today, so I'm just going to start again next Monday, or I failed, or like getting away from that all or nothing mindset, and actually, finding an approach that works for them longer term.
I agree. You've got to break it down and understand that I was talking about third person perspective versus first person perspective. That first person is how most people live. They're like in their day, they're in their routine, they're making decisions there and then. But I think it's important to then zoom out and give you that third person perspective. Like I always think video games, like classic GoldenEye first person perspective. All you can see is the hand in the gun. Can't really see much going on beside you. Yeah. If you zoom out to that third person, you can now see how you're interacting. You can see the decisions you're making, and then also you hit upon this perfectly. If you're looking back, let's say, for example, you do set a number of steps you're trying to get every single day and you fail it. You said, but you can look back and go, oh, maybe I could have done this and maybe I could have done that. Technically, that's not a failure. To me, that's you learning. That's you then taking what you've experienced and then going, okay, well, I could see that I had like 15 minutes spare there that I just stood and doom scrolled. Maybe I could pace around the house, or maybe I could park a little bit further away. And we talk about all these really simple things. And we were going to talk about this ad nauseum on this podcast, so get ready for that. We're going to talk about the things that actually make a difference, not these sensationalist things that we see all the time on social media, because we're just going to give you what actually works. Okay, so yeah, it's about looking at what you didn't achieve and then go, okay, well, how could I make that a bit easier for myself? So, basically set yourself up for success.
Just sorry, mate. I got one more point on that. We really have it at this point. Like one question that I consistently ask my clients is like, what, if anything, would you go back and do differently? Because like you said, if there is something they've not hit that they were trying to, there's either something to learn from that and something to take away and be like, okay, next time I'm going to do this. Or they might look at their week and be like, actually, that was a really hard week. Like, children were ill, like work was hectic, had all this stress, all this stuff. And actually, I think you give yourself permission to actually be like, okay, mate, like I wouldn't actually necessarily do anything different, so I can probably stop beating myself up for what happened that week, and now let's just move on to the next week. So I think it's really easy to set these unrealistic goals and then constantly beat yourself up when you inevitably don't hit them. But actually, just like asking yourself that question can be really helpful to either learn something or like stop beating yourself up about what's happened.
I agree. There's so many, like, life's already hard enough. Don't punch yourself. Life's already as much as it can. So yeah, there's no point in like focusing on all the things you didn't do right. It's about like, okay, well, maybe I didn't do that as well as I would like. How can I improve? Either you win or you learn. That's again another phrase that my clients are probably sick to death of, but I don't care because it works. So the next point is focusing on systems rather than your mood, and this is something I talk about a lot. Especially on social media. I always, if I'm having a bad session or I don't particularly want to turn up to a session, I'm just going to tell you because I think it's important. I think you see on social media these people, like tendency is you have a great session, you want to talk about the session you had. You do something good, you want to talk about the thing you did well. You don't really want to talk about the mundane kind of normal things that you're doing. I have said this all the time. If you watched one of my training sessions or watched how I ate or just stared through my window like a little peeping Tom.
Do people do that?
Yeah, sometimes. A stick or a pellet gun usually disperses them easily enough. But I don't think you'd see anything particularly interesting, to be honest, if you're looking at my systems and what I do in a day. I think a lot of people go wrong by thinking they set their goals when they're in a super motivated mood, when they're like, motivation is as high as it can possibly be. And I always think, great, you want to capitalize on that at the start of your journey, but then you've got to put in things after that which are systems rather than like, I'm in the mood to go and do this. You're like, I'm doing this because this is what I've planned for today. There's a big difference. We should not be relying on our mood to dictate the results that we're going to get. We should be looking at their systems. So what does systems mean to you? Like, if someone said, do you rely on systems rather than your mood? What would you say to a client about in that regard?
as you allude to there, I think like the actually like making a plan and scheduling time in your diary, that sort of thing, rather than like say kind of waking up and you're like, I'm super motivated today, I'm going to do this thing. And I think generally trying to make it as easy as possible for yourself to make the decisions that you want to make.
Yeah.
And there's a few different things that kind of that tie into this. So one thing that I talk to clients quite often about is environment, particularly around sort of food, for example. If you've got something like sweets or cake or something like that that is out on the side in the kitchen, you have to make the decision every time you walk past it not to eat it. Whereas if it's in the cupboard tucked away, or even like out of the house, or like obviously like everyone has some kind of sweet treats in their house, but if it's tucked away, you have to make the decision to go and find it. Which actually, if you look at sort of triggers from a habit perspective, like it being out of sight and just modifying your food environment from that perspective can be really, really powerful. And then I think also another thing that's really important is making it as easy as possible to do the thing that you want to do. So say you want to go for a run the next morning, if you lay out your kit, get your trainers are ready by the door, like all of those things again become visual triggers for that habit and behavior that you're trying to do, rather than waking up in the morning and be like, oh, where's my stuff? Oh, it's not clean. Oh, I'm just going to do it like it makes it so easy to not do that thing. So yeah, I think that there's loads from a sort of habit perspective that we can look at to do that. And like I said, I quite often just try and focus on just finding the easiest way possible to achieve the thing that we're trying to achieve.
Path of least resistance.
Yeah. How about you? What can you give us like a few examples of sort of systems that you would use yourself with clients?
Yeah, so I mean, you've I was laughing there because I was like everything I always say as well. Like you want to step yourself up. You want to create an environment that allows you to do the things you want to do. So simple things. So this is I'll use two examples, three examples actually that I've done for myself that I've then used as examples for clients. Because I always think as a coach, if you can say, this is what I would like you to do. Here's just a couple of things that I've actually walked this walk as well. I'm not just talking this talk. This is what I've used this approach to do. So first of all, my nebulizers. My nebulizers are something I don't particularly like doing them, to be honest, Tom. I've never liked doing nebulizers. It's something that has always been like there's been a stigma in my head since I was a kid that no one else I know had to do nebulizers, and I didn't particularly want to do them, and they always made me feel like weak. To be honest, that's how I always perceived it, which is obviously nonsense. But I realized that I need to start taking them a little bit more frequently, and it was usually packed away under the stairs, like underneath everything that usually goes under the stairs.
Yeah.
So I was like, well, I need to take this, and if I know that I have to go and get it from the stairs every single time, I'm not going to use it. So I literally have it just sitting on the kitchen table, and the adherence to my nebulizing shot up because it was literally just there. It was just in front of me, as you said, out of sight, out of mind. We have thousands upon thousands upon thousands of thoughts every single day. To be expected to remember this one new thing that you're trying to do is a lot to ask. So if you have it there sitting, it's going to make it much easier for you to engage in, and that's what I did. As I said, my nebulizing uptake, it just shot up. I started doing it way more regularly. Then I did this thing, and habit stacked essentially, and I was like, right, well, when I'm doing my nebulizers, I can't really do much. I don't want to just sit and scroll on my phone, so I'm going to read. And then I set a book out in front of the nebulizer. So I literally, when I nebulize, I read, and I've done two things there that I'm like, cool. But if that book wasn't sitting there, if it was sitting where it usually sits on the bookshelf, when I sit down to take my nebulizers, I'm like, it's all the way over there.
Yeah.
Even though it's like all the way over there is probably 2.5 seconds of movement. As you said, you're trying to make it as easy as possible. That's what makes it easy as possible. And then the other thing I mentioned earlier, the boys being on the treadmill because it's in the living room.
Yeah.
Another thing. We have a walking pad that was in the gym. In my house, by the way, I have a gym in the house. I'm very, very fortunate to say that. But it's in my own house, and I still never used it because it was in the garage. And again, talking about optimizing things, I had to put it somewhere that was easily accessible that I could use. So there's three things where I've used that kind of systems rather than my mood.
Yeah.
To kind of win as such. But yeah, like even having your gym stuff set out. I always say to my clients, have a spare gym bag in your car with everything you would need to go to the gym. So let's say you have that motivation. I always think motivation is such a I call it like the M word because it's one of those things I hate hearing about. Like, how are you so motivated? What do you do for motivation? Blah blah blah. And I'm like,
Yeah.
not really much. I haven't got much to talk about there because it doesn't really play a huge role in
Yeah.
what I've done. But let's say the motivation does strike you. I always say take it, just go for it. Just grab it by both handles and ride it because it's very rare that it comes along. So if you've got something in your car, like let's say you do pack a gym bag, all your stuff's in there, and you're like, hey, I'm really motivated to go to the gym, maybe after work. You don't have to go, oh, I have to go all the way home. And then once I get home, then I have to go back out again.
Yeah.
I was telling my clients, just have a gym bag ready with all your stuff so you can literally just grab it and go. And you can take advantage of those moments where you do have that kind of spike in motivation and your mood does allow you to do something. But yeah, just setting up systems. Even when it comes to food. What about food? Are you a system guy when it comes to food? Or
To a certain extent, yeah. What I tend to do, like most of the time, I eat the same stuff, which I think for most people makes it a lot easier. So normally breakfast and lunches, I rotate through 3 to 5 different things for those meals, just because I make sure they're obviously like ticking the box from a protein and micronutrient fiber perspective. But also just like a lot of the time I've not got much time. I don't really want to spend loads of time prepping it. So it's stuff that's just really easy for me to either prep quickly the night before or like cook really quickly then and there. That doesn't take loads of time. So that's one of the key things. And then I think also something that's really, really helpful for a lot of people is implementation intentions, which is developing kind of if-then scenarios. So if this thing happens, then I will do X action. Because a lot of time that's where people end up going off their plan. It's like, oh, I didn't have any food, so I ended up going to Tesco and I just bought the whole shop because I was really hungry. It's like okay, cool. That's happening. We know that happens at least. Like, it's probably going to happen again. It's happened at least once before. If you go to Tesco's, then I'd recommend buying this, and this. Like maybe you have like a chicken salad sandwich and a protein yogurt and a piece of fruit. And then you've always got the choice that you can, if you really want to have something else, you can have something else. But a lot of the time, it takes the choice out of it. So you've pre-made that choice, and then it's so much easier when that thing happens again. You're like, cool, I know exactly what I'm going to do here, and actually setting up sort of those implementation intentions for different things that do tend to happen. Like, I was really hungry, so I stopped at the service station, or anything like that. It's really useful to have those kind of fallback habits, because like I said, you've always got the choice. If you really want to have, as a Big Mac and fries from McDonald's, cool, but there's probably another option that you can have. And if you've kind of pre-thought out a choice that like will tick the boxes and help you get to where you want to get to, then and not have to think about it at the time, that works really well for a lot of people.
Yep, I agree. I think a lot of this comes down to trying to offload as much mental real estate as possible, because you think about it, people who are just making decisions like literally hip firing, I always call it like hip fire decisions. The amount of energy you're going to get back from not having to do that, from not having to decide what you're going to have every single day, from not walking around a shop and wasting your time going, what's this, and reading the back of pack. Like, if you're going to get back so much more time if you have these systems in place. I think people really they go, oh, but I'm gonna have to like prep things. I mean, yes, you will, but that's going to give you back more time later on with things that you actually care about. Do you think people want to spend the amount of time they do as an adult deciding what to eat? I think it's the biggest. Why did school never tell us about this?
Yeah.
Why did no one in school? By the way, once you move out of your parents' house, most of your decision making is going to be spent on what we're going to have to eat next.
Yeah.
No one told me about this. So if you
it's still what I think about most of the time, to be honest.
Yeah, I'm very similar to you as well. I have these I usually give myself like 2 or 3 options when it comes to breakfast and lunch, because they're usually the ones that are most of the time the same. I usually have a fast option that if I've woken up late because I love sleeping, and I need to get some nutrients in me, but it needs to check these boxes, like you said. Like, it's going to give me enough calories, it's going to give me enough protein, it's going to give me enough fiber, micronutrients, all those things. I'll have one option for that, which is usually, to be honest, it's a shake. 2 scoops of protein, which is 50 grams of protein, 4 scoops of oats, which is about like 80 grams of carbs, and then some honey and some almond butter, and then a bit of creatine in there. And that's usually what I have most breakfasts, because I don't wake up hungry, but I know I need something, so I'm not like getting into like 3 a.m. or 3 p.m. and then not having anything. And then lunch is exactly the same. I usually have either cream cheese and bagels with salmon, which I just had today, or my pizza wraps, which is literally a whole wrap tortilla, packet of chicken, some cuts of pepperoni, some tomato puree or pasta, pizza sauce, and then some cheese. Stick that in the air fryer. Done. And if I was looking to like add more, if I was looking to put on size or was looking to cut, then I would just look at the portion size and just reduce them. It's that easy. You don't need to change everything.
Yeah.
If you're just adjusting something slightly. So yeah, systems over mood is a good one. Okay. So next up, we have the setting your outcome, but focusing on the process. So Tom, dig into that for me. What does that mean to you?
So I think I went through a process of really moving away from outcome goals, and an outcome goal would be I want to be able to I don't know, squat 150 kilos, run a mile in X time, like that sort of thing. Something that's very kind of black and white, that's very set in stone. I now think having an outcome goal is useful to determine the direction for your training. And I think having something in your head that you want to aim for, but really knowing that the goal is just improvement on where you're currently at. So say for example, you can currently squat 100 kilos, you want to get to 150, so that might be your outcome goal, but really the outcome goal is to get stronger in your squats.
Yep.
And I think that's really useful for helping you determine direction and giving your training purpose. And something that I quite often do with clients, like they know they want to get stronger, but they don't really care like what that they don't really know what that means, or like they don't really care about necessarily being able to bench a certain amount. So what we'll do is we'll pick 3 or 4 different lifts. We'll use them as our indicators of progress. So it might be like an upper body push, an upper body pull exercise, and then 2 lower body exercises, and we'll test it at the start, and then we'll use that to kind of gauge our progress over time to show that we are progressing along that journey. But we don't like actually the outcome isn't actually that important. What is actually important is the process. So for example, let's use the squat as an example. If you want to be able to like build your squat, probably turning up and training 3 times a week is going to be like high on that list of priorities of a process to tick
advantageous. Yeah, it's got
advantageous.
Yeah, trying to get
and actually like using the outcome to like set the direction, but then looking at okay, what are the processes that I need to do to get there, and then week in week out focusing on the processes and just kind of forget about the outcome, because we know if we're focusing on the process and enjoying that and progressing with that, then we're going to get the outcome anyway.
Exactly.
So that's how I sort of frame that. Like how would you frame that with clients?
I mean, exactly what you just said there. I think, setting the outcome is really important. That's the exciting part. I always say, look, what is it you want to achieve? And they're like, okay, I would like to lose some body fat or something like that. And I'm like, cool, great, like, that's fantastic. But then you have to then say, okay, well, I always try and frame it as, okay, well, if you were this person who was leaner, who is at a body fat percentage as you would like to be at, what decisions are they making every single day? What's the process that they're following? Are they making hip fire decisions when it comes to nutrition? Probably not. Are they someone who is quite active and moving around a lot and choosing to find ways to, encourage activity in their daily life? Probably. You've just got to frame it as, okay, look, if we can get this process nailed, as you said, the outcome is guaranteed. Like, I love this. There's, excuse me. Oh, just swallow something. I remember hearing that Olympic athletes' training program, now again, people can correct me on this if I'm wrong, but this is what I heard, that training Olympic athletes, mostly their training sessions are blocked into 6-week programs because humans really struggle to see past 6 weeks. Like, we can't comprehend what 6 weeks is going to look like. Whereas if I say to you, Tom, what's tonight going to look like for you? You could fairly confidently predict what's going to happen tonight because you've probably planned it already, or it's what you do normally. And then I say, okay, well, what does this time next week look like for you? You're like, well, I know we're doing this podcast. I know I've got a client that usually is around this time. This might happen. And then I say, well, what about 3 weeks' time? And as you introduce more and more variables to the situation, it becomes harder and harder for you to visually see what that's going to look like. So the further you go into the future, the more difficult it is for you to actually see what's going on. I think a lot of people do that when they set up their big goal. It's really hard to actually conceptualize what that's going to look like.
Yeah.
So doing these little 6-week blocks for, and again, this is Olympic athletes, apparently they do this where they train for 6 weeks. They have a goal to achieve in 6 weeks, which is ultimately building towards this bigger goal. So obviously if you're trying to, using your analogy, if you're trying to squat 150 kilos, currently squatting 100, surely the next process, or the process for you should be squatting 101 kilos, 102, or be able to squat 101, 102, 103, 104, 105, building up and up and up. If you follow that process, inevitably, if you keep to that and you tweak and you change things where you need to change things, you will inevitably get to the 150 kilos. So I think making sure that you are setting yourself these little goals throughout the way and engaging in the process as much as possible, you're guaranteeing the result, which is exactly what you should be doing. So, again, I didn't really have much else to add to that, so I think that's a fairly quick one. So the next one is building foundations. So we were talking about this, we were deciding how to phrase this, because I was saying about you want to embrace the dullness of it, but we were saying that's not the right term for it, because it may look dull, but I don't think it is dull. I don't find it dull. Looking in on it, you might look at it and go, well, I'm just doing the same session. In fact, I did the same session today that I've done for the last 6 or 7 weeks. And a lot of people will be like, well, that's boring. I'm like, I don't think it's boring. I think it's actually quite a lot of fun, because I can see how I'm getting stronger. I can see the little changes that I'm making because I'm not changing the variables every time I go into the gym. I'm not going, oh, well, last week I did machine chest press. I'm going to throw in some incline dumbbell press, because then I'm like, well, did I get stronger? Because I can't really measure that. They're two very, very different exercises, different machines, different setups. You could have the seat slightly lower down. So the more variables you can control, I think the better. And that's about what it is when we're building foundation. So what do you think about this whole idea that we are essentially, this podcast and coaches who are worth their salt will constantly be telling you, you don't need to do these sexy things, these sexy, interesting things that you see are designed for that. They're designed to pull you towards this thing, to sell you something ultimately. The bread and butter things work. So, if someone comes to you and says, I want to do this exercise because I saw this YouTuber doing it or this Instagram person doing it, and it's a ridiculous exercise, what's your typical response to someone who says something like that?
Why?
Yeah.
Probably can I have a go?
Yeah.
No, I completely agree. I think when we look at setting our training up, it's the foundational stuff. It's it doesn't really matter what exercise it is you're choosing, but choosing an exercise that allows you to move through a good range of motion, that allows you to add load over time, and that probably you enjoy doing. That if you're doing that for a squat pattern, a hinge pattern, an upper body push and pull, vertical and horizontal, you're going to be ticking off all of the boxes, and actually you don't need to change that much, as you said, week to week necessarily. And obviously within that, that's not to say do this, always do the same stuff.
No, definitely not.
And I think different people need different amounts of variation within their training, but we need enough stability that, as you said, you're able to know what you did last week and potentially add a rep or two, add a little bit of weight, and that you're progressing, rather than it being something different every single time. That because with training, after a certain point, everything feels a bit hard anyway. So by just constantly changing your exercises, you're going to be more sore, because moving through slightly different ranges of motion generally gives you more DOMs.
Delayed on soreness, by the way.
You'll just be spinning your wheels.
You know what DOMs mean, by the way? Is it delayed onset soreness? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, you're going to have more soreness. But
Yep.
yeah, if you're constantly changing stuff, it's really easy to like kid yourself that you're progressing, but actually just be like spinning your wheels and not actually getting anywhere.
Yeah.
I think people can create variation within their program week to week, but having the same core elements that are in there is really important. And you might, as a like, if someone really needs lots of variation all the time, I would like maybe change the warm up every time, because it's like you can just have a bit of like freedom to create a little bit of movement variability, move in some slightly different ways.
Yep.
Maybe like change the finish or isolation stuff, which is very constrained anyway. So like if you're pushing a set close to failure, like it's not going to matter too much whether it's one variation or the other.
Exactly.
But you probably will be better off keeping it consistent for at least a couple of weeks. And particularly with stuff that is very like that does have a skill element to it, because it's going to take you a couple of weeks to be able to build the skill to be able to do that thing effectively and load it effectively enough that you're going to get something from it.
I agree. I think what I would try to encourage with people, and this is how I started. I wanted to master the basics, and I've been training for 20 plus years, and I still don't consider myself a master on anything. I'm good at some stuff, but I definitely wouldn't say I'm the master of anything. But I think a great mindset to have when it comes to exercise is take pride in your ability to execute those movements rather than just thinking like, oh, I'm getting stronger and stronger and stronger. Because typically what happens is if you're pushing for just getting stronger, technique and, safety kind of falls away a little bit. But that also doesn't mean that pride in your technique gets in the way of making progress. That's a very tricky line. I remember training with it was Neil Hill. He was a bodybuilding coach, and I trained with him. And he said, "Look, Ben, your form is like fantastic." I was doing a lat pull down. Remember, he's like, "Your form is fantastic, but you're leaving a lot on the table because of that." I was like, "Okay, what do you mean?" He's like, "Well, your reps are like solid, nice controlled eccentric, nice controlled concentric, activating elbows driving down nice and low. All as far as I'm concerned, like chef's kiss. But you know that if you pull back a little bit, got a little bit of what I call body influence into it. When you're doing a lat pull down, naturally you kind of want to lean back to kind of pull that further down. If you know you can do that and maybe squeeze out 2 or 3 more reps at the end of your set, go for it. Don't let your technique and your pride of your technique be the thing that stops you. A lot of people can tend to do that. They will say like, "Oh, I can't curl that weight because I've gone up, so I'll just drop back to the lighter one that I know I can get perfect form with." I'm like, great, cool, but keep lifting that heavy weight because that's probably going to do more for you than getting this perfect form on every single rep. You need to be able to step outside of that pride. But I think at the core, if your pride and your mindset is about, I want to get as good as I possibly can at these basic compound bread and butter movements, that's a pretty solid place to be. And again, you can have that variation of like, again, most exercise. Well, first of all exercises are made up. Let's just put that on the table. They're all made up. It's not like this came with a guide and they're like, there you go. There's how the human body moves. All exercises you see, every piece of equipment has been made up by someone who went, wonder if this works. So I think the thing to stay away from is new and exciting, and try to lean into consistency and effectiveness. That's probably the better way of looking at things. New and exciting, cool. Don't get me wrong. I think everyone's a bit of a sucker for that. If someone says, "This is the one chest exercise that you're not doing, that's the reason why your chest isn't growing," I'm like, "So what is it I haven't been doing?" And then you look and you're like, "Yeah, that's not going to do much." Like holding a plate and doing like these weight. I've seen the amount of stuff I see online is hilarious, but again, the reason why that works is because it spikes our curiosity. But realistically, it's the big boring, I'm air quoting again a podcast, it's the big boring things that you need to be falling in love with and try and enjoy the process of getting better and better at those, again, boring exercises. We talked about this at the start. If you ask anyone who's been training for a consistent period of time to write down some of their bread and butter exercises, you will find a lot of overlap between those exercises they select. And that's for a reason, because they are, generally speaking, the basics. The basics work. It's just people don't like to hear that because they're like, I want to hear about this new exercise that someone made up. But yeah, that's just not the case.
Yeah.
Okay, so there are the 4. Now we're going to go on to the final point, which we both agree is I would say arguably the most important thing. And if you can focus on this, all these other kind of points that we've made to the up to this point will meet. They'll be so much easier. And that is focusing on your identity rather than your goals. What does that mean for you? Like if someone said to you, tell me what that means to you, Tom. Focusing on identity rather than goals.
So, I think identity-based goal setting is kind of the overarching principle that like some of the, like we've mentioned, sort of outcome goals that and the process goals, they all kind of sit underneath that, and it's basically looking at where you want to get to, but looking at that as an identity that is anchored in your values, and looking at the behaviours of that person and what they're doing consistently on a daily and weekly basis, and kind of reverse engineering from there to where you're at now. So you've got this idea of like this identity that you want to have, and so it's something I've sort of spoken to my clients about. Like my sort of identity that I'm sort of constantly working towards is physical freedom.
Oh.
Maybe that too. And that for me kind of it sums up like all of the training, the nutrition, like everything else that I need to be doing on a daily and weekly basis to maintain like my physical freedom for as long as possible. But yeah, it's basically looking at like creating alignment between your values and the behaviours that you want to have, and then working backwards from there. And I think it's quite useful to do that. If you've got an idea of like what that identity is, you can look at where you're at now and potentially foresee barriers or friction that you've currently got that's going to kind of stop you from getting there as well. And I think like sort of that kind of forward planning can be a very useful step when you're looking at setting goals. How would you sort of define that?
I mean, this is something I've realized upon reflection has been such a big part of my life. This idea of identity rather than these goals, because goals change all the time. When I started training, I wanted to look like Ja Rule, the rapper. It's changed a little bit, and there's a couple of reasons why that wouldn't ever work. But yeah, I think for me, I get asked the question, why do you train? Like, why do you train? And I always just say, oh, for my cystic fibrosis. Like, it makes me stay fit and makes me feel healthy. And then I realized that's actually not it. It's the fact that I train because it's something I've always done, but that's not enough, because a lot of people train for a long time and then stop. So that's not good. That's not why I do it. The reason why I do it and the reason why it's part of my identity is because I went from growing up with CF, I felt like I was a burden. I've said this before, but I felt like, my brother and sister didn't have it. My mum had to take me to all my, doctor's appointments. She had to do all my nebulizers. She had to do all my medication. I was more effort than my brother and sister were. And they never made me feel like that. Like, my parents never made me feel like that. But, like in your head, you're like, well, my brother doesn't have to do all this stuff. I have to do this stuff. I can see my mum, cleaning all my nebulizers and getting all my tablets and putting them in the little collector, so I just pop them open and take them. So I went from feeling like I was a burden to then feeling like, and yeah, to a certain extent, like weak, to then training and feeling strong, and then feeling like I was actually a service to people, because people would ask me what to do. They would ask me how to train my chest. They would ask me how to train, and this is before I started coaching. It's just my friends, because I would sit in my work and just read muscle fitness and men's health and all those things, and just absorb all the mostly decent information that you would have got from those. But yeah, to me, the identity thing is such an important process of this, or part of this aspect, or part of this whole thing, because if you are tying all the processes to who you want to be, it's very hard to stop someone when they start thinking like that. Like, I am someone who trains. I'm not someone who trains because of this. I'm just someone who does that. I train very regularly. I always have. But another aspect of this that makes me continue to do it, and this is a thing I say all the time, but the reason why I keep doing what I'm doing is because I'm proud of the fact that I've kept doing what I'm doing. Like, this is not an easy thing to engage with. Going to the gym is not easy. We all know how easy it is to just not go.
Yep.
Like, if someone gives you the option, naturally our human instinct is to be like, I'm just going to sit in the sofa, I'm just not going to go. Whereas the fact that I've done that, even though the easy option was always there, being like, hello, come on, come sit in the sofa, come play the PlayStation, go and hang out, like, not go hanging out with your friends. I would always pick hanging out with my friends and going to the gym. But the fact that I've chosen that path and I continue to choose it is why I continue to do it, because I'm so proud of the fact that I did that, and that's part of my identity. I'm proud of the fact that I never stopped this process. That is, how many people do you know that have stopped going to the gym? They've been, I used to go to the gym, and just getting a taxi at any a taxi or an Uber, and that taxi driver be like, I used to be in the same shape as you, and I'm like, okay. And then I hurt my back, and it all fell away. I'm like, all right, cool. I want to be the guy who's doing this until I physically can't. Like you said about physical freedom, I always want to be ready for anything that life throws at me, because I have, my life has gone a completely different direction that it could have gone, simply because, and again, it's not all down to the gym, but a lot of it has gone down to the gym, of the fact that I was physically ready to do a lot of the stuff that came at me, like the paddleboarding. So I was asked to paddleboard from Florida, from the Bahamas to Florida for a charity for cystic fibrosis. Now that all came about by a podcast, and I did the podcast. It was like 10:30 at night. Originally, I wasn't even going to show up because I was like, it's 10:30 at night. I'm going to be exhausted. I don't want to really particularly do this because it's based in Florida, but I'll do it anyway. Anyway, did the podcast. They were talking about the charity event that they do, and then after the call, they rang me and were like, would you want to do this? Like, it's coming up pretty soon. Would you want to try this paddleboard? I was like, sure. Honestly, Tom, I heard Bahamas, and I was like, I'm in. I'll be there. And then I realized, I don't know how to paddleboard, but I could give it a good go. I've got decent balance. I know how to use a paddle, and I know how to use an oar, so I feel like I could put it together. So yeah, 2 weeks notice. 2 weeks later, I was in the Bahamas learning how to paddleboard. But if I hadn't have done all of the training leading up to that, if I hadn't kept myself in that position of being ready as such, that's an opportunity that I just wouldn't have had. And I met some of the most important people in my life because of that. And I've had, there's so many experiences. I always say that I want fitness and health to open up as many doors as possible in my life, not close it. I don't want my body to be closing doors on me. I want it to be opening them, or preferably just booting them open. And that sounds like your physical freedom. It sounds like we have a different way of phrasing the exact same thing, that you want to be able to do everything that comes across. Like if your boys want to wrestle or see if dad can hold them above his head, you want to be able to do that, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so I think we're very much aligned with that, but identity-based habits, and we tend to lean towards the things that we're proud of as well. Like my friend, his mum always said I was a really good hugger, like since we were kids. Ben always gives good hugs, and I was like, okay, so naturally I want to hug more people because that's been attributed to me. Or I remember someone saying in a American football huddle, was like, someone smells really good, and you know what it's like team sports. Like
put that down to your trainer, mate.
No. But the idea that like someone said to me something that I was like, oh, that's quite nice to be known for that.
Yeah.
I'm gonna make sure I don't smell like an old shoe bag going forward, because that was a nice thing. So what I always try to encourage people to do when they're starting this thing is, first of all, embrace the good traits that you have. You want to nurture those things, like being a problem solver. Very important. Very, very important problem or aspect to have. And identity to have when you're doing this type of thing. Like we said earlier, if you're not winning, you're learning. If you're a problem solver, you're going to see it like that. You're not going to go, oh, I failed. You're like, okay, there's the problem. How do I solve that problem that didn't get me the steps or the calories or the protein or the weights? If you're a problem solver, you're going to do that. It's always about encouraging and nurturing those traits that are so important to you, but also the goals that you have as well. So I think, identifying and changing the verbiage as well. I always think words are so, we talk about, we play D&D. That's how Tom and I met, in a random tangent. There you go. But, there's magic in that game, and, a lot of it's based on verbiage and words and the power of words. And still agree that words are probably the most powerful thing we have, and communication, and even how you speak to yourself, how you, just how you treat yourself is so important. Like, instead of being someone like, oh, I try to go to the gym. No, I am someone who goes to the gym. I train on a Monday, and Wednesday, and a Friday. And if I can't do that, then I move it around. Like, you want to be as assertive as possible when it comes to these identity-based habits, because if you can do that, if you are that person, all this falls into place. If you start identifying, okay, well, if I want to be that person that I'm trying to project into, what decisions did they make? Would they, wing it? And whenever they're out for food, would they just grab whatever's handy, or would they take a beat and go, okay, well, it's maybe what I want right now, but am I doing myself, tomorrow's self, like a solid by doing this? Probably not. Okay, I'll grab that. So it's about challenging that identity and making sure you're, filling that aspect of your identity out with positive things that are going to get you to your goals. But yeah, very, very important aspect of it.
And yeah, I completely agree, mate. I think there is a lot of power in saying I am this person, rather than I
would like to be.
I try to do this, or
Yes.
that sort of thing. I think if you commit to being saying I am this thing, that's a really, really powerful statement to make. And like I said, it then makes all the other kind of processes and everything else much easier, because you're already looking at what that person and where you want to get to.
And you just have to act. You just have to act like that person, that. You just in that situation, you go, okay, well, what would this person do if this is the person I'm trying to be? What decision would they make in this situation? And again, you don't have to make they don't have to get 100%. You're talking about the all or nothing mindset. You're not going to make every single one of those decisions correctly. Again, air quoting. Terrible at that on a podcast. You're not going to you shouldn't be expecting yourself to make every single one of those decisions, positively. Some of them you might not. But then you go, okay, well, why didn't I do that? Okay, what did I learn from that? Cool. And then you move forward. So you really can't, if you have that mindset, you can't fail. Yeah. You just learn, and then you apply what you've learned, move forward. Apply what you've learned, move forward. And you're just constantly refining. And I think identity-based stuff is so important. You need to believe in who you want to be and understand, okay, well, I need to start making decisions based off that version of myself, rather than the old outdated script that I've been reading and kind of applying to everything. So those are 5 habits that will hopefully help you make your New Year's goals a little bit easier, or if not, any goals in general. I think this applies, as we said at the start, this applies to whatever time of the year you listen to this at, but hopefully it will help you in the new year. Tom, do you have any New Year's resolutions? Oh no, sorry, you did. You said at the start you wanted to.
I said at the start.
I'm trying to think. Have I got any? I don't think I have any. I'll probably come up with some later on, but I can't think of any. Is that everything? Is that us wrapped up? I think that's that episode wrapped up. We're closing up on an hour, which hopefully you've enjoyed the hour of listening to us chatting. But Tom, where can people find you on social media, just in case we're trying to direct them?
So I imagine probably the first couple of people that do listen to this will probably have come from our social media anyway. But I'm at Tom Project Performance on Instagram is the main place you'll probably find me. Perfect.
With me, it is Ben Mudge _ Someone's taken Ben Mudge and he's not used it in 10 years.
So frustrating.
Anyway, thank you so much for listening to this podcast. If you could leave a review, if you could share this with people you think it might benefit, it would mean a hell of a lot to myself and Tom. And if you've enjoyed the podcast, please leave a rating of 5 stars. Would be preferable. If you think we're 5-star men, then please leave us 5 stars. And if you can, leave a written review as well, wherever you can do that. We hope you have a fantastic day. And thank you again for listening to the Training and Tangents podcast.
Thanks, guys.